I'm Cindy Kelly, Atomic Heritage Foundation, and I'm in Orland Park, Illinois. It is Tuesday, March 13, 2018, and I have with me Theodore Petry. And my first question for him is to say his name, his full name, and to spell it.
Oh, Theodore Frank Petry, Jr. Right, the name Theodore is Theodore, and F for Frank, and Petry, of course, capital Petry, and Jr.
Great, thank you. So, first I just want to know something about, first, where you were born, when you were born, and a little bit about your family.
Well, my family were Southsiders in Chicago. I was born at 67th and Normal in Chicago, and I've lived almost all my life in Chicago and around and in the area. Went to school in Chicago, college in Chicago, and the whole works.
That's great. Well, tell me, what did your parents do for a living?
Well, in those days, actually, my dad was a meat salesman. My mother was a housewife. And, of course, during the course of events, he worked for the WPA in Chicago, the Works Projects Administration. Everybody was without jobs, so they got you the jobs. And we lived at 68th and Carpenter for over 40 years until I got married and left home, and here we are now.
And tell us when you were born. What was your birthday?
I was born June 21st, 1924. That was the first day of summer and the longest day of the year.
And you came out.
And two of us. Right. I was firstborn, and my brother followed.
And what is his name?
His name is Arthur F. Frederick Petry.
Great. So did you have other siblings?
Yes, I had a sister, Barbara Jean Petry, and she passed away long before we did. My brother has passed away also.
So you say you went to high school in Chicago and college? What high school and what?
I went to a boys' high school in Chicago called Tilden Technical High School. It was the old Lake High School originally, and then at 47th and Union in Chicago. I went there, I graduated from there, and then eventually I went to Chicago State University and got my degree because I started teaching high school, and then I needed that degree to teach.
So that was later in your life, though, that you went back to college, so you were in your 30s. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you do right after you graduated from
Actually, I was recruited for the Manhattan District Project at Tilden in the last year. So when I got right out of Tilden, I went right to work at the University of Chicago in the West Stands. And that's where we built the first pile and did a lot of experiments under Enrico Fermi.
My goodness, you must have been quite a protege.
No.
Only 17, 18 years old?
Well, like I tell other people, it was a job. I mean, during those days, jobs were not easy to get. So that's where I just went right to work. Like I say, they recruited us to go to work at the university right from high school.
So how many in your class?
Oh, there were maybe 400 fellas. It was all boys school in the class, but I'd say less than 10 of us were recruited for the at the university, and those fellows went on to different places. There were several of them that stayed with the university, but went out to California, to Los Alamos, different places where they were working, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and worked there. And I didn't follow up where they went after that. I just went, they went their way, I went my way.
So what was it that made you stand out for the University of Chicago? Why did they seek you? How did they hire you?
They came to the high school and recruited. They interviewed you, and right from there they hired you. So the minute I graduated, I went right to work at the university, and I was more of a, what do you want to call it? A messenger or something at the university, going downtown, picking up different things. Like the one time I went down, all this was on the streetcar, the Cottage Grove streetcar. Go downtown and pick up uranium or something, some radioactive material, actually just put it in my pocket and go back with it to the university. And eventually they did test your blood, and my red blood corpuscles were diminishing, so they decided to pick up the radioactive material with a station wagon and a lead container where they could put the radioactive material in it and bring it back to the university.
That probably made some sense.
Yeah, it finally did, yeah. I probably wouldn't have been here. I don't know if the blood samples are there yet or not.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's what it was. I worked, like I say, under Enrico Fermi, and there was other Zillard was there. He was a refugee from Vienna, I think. There were many of those people that came as refugees because Hitler was controlling all the things, and they came down through Europe and got out of Europe and were emigrated to the United States. That's what Fermi did. He was in Italy, and Mussolini took over, and Fermi left there with his wife Laura and came to the United States, which we were fortunate to have.
Indeed.
Right.
So you must have towered over Enrico Fermi.
Oh, yes, he was a little guy. He's short and very quiet. I mean, I can remember him just doing things, and he'd, when the final experiment came, he did his calculations with his slide rule. He was a slide rule man, and he just kept calculating and calculating. Finally, he says, that's enough. Let's go to lunch. And it was that the experiment went through. That big pile, and just one little slide rule calculation, and it was all over with. We had fellows there that were, they went with the unit to Argonne Lab and that, and other places, but they were stationed on top of the pile. On top of the pile was a canvas tarp, and they were sent on that canvas tarp and held liquid, what was it? Cadmium. So in case when the pile, if it went critical and got away with it, they could pour that over the top of the pile. And of course, if you've seen pictures of the West Stands, they had when you went doorways jackhammered out of the concrete stands, and those were escape doorways in case something went critical and we couldn't contain it. They said, just get out of those things and head for Indiana. That was their saying, head for Indiana, just get away. But that's all that happened there. And I think...
Were you involved in creating the... Did you get involved in...
Yes, I actually handled the graphite. There was a fellow named August Newth. He was a carpenter, and we did the planing of the carbon blocks. They were about, I say, 30 inches in length, and we planed them down to 4 by 4, and then they had a big drill press there where they drilled the holes. They compressed the uranium into cylinders, small cylinders, and they put those cylinders in the holes of the carbon. And then they stacked those up. I forget how many they said. There were 45,000 pieces of carbon that they put in there. They still have some over at the National Archives. They take them out with white gloves and set them down and put them back in boxes after. In those days, they had semester from September to January, and then from January to June. So you were in either second year A, which was first part of the year, and then the B after that. But that's the way most of the high schools were set up at that time, you know. So.
Didn't they also hire you and Art?
They hired me from Tilden. They came into Tilden Tech and interviewed.
They hired Art also too, didn't they, initially?
My brother.
Yeah.
Yes, they hired us both. I have a twin brother, and they hired us both. But my twin brother decided the military was much better, so he joined the Coast Guard and went into the service. And he stayed in the service, actually, 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were talking about how you had planed the graphite blocks and...
Right. We use woodworking tools. We use shapers for planing, where we could square off the carbon blocks, the graphite blocks, into, well, you could say perfect squares, because they were a little off when they came out of wherever it was, the factory or wherever it came from. And they would run them through the planer and square them off, and then pile them up in the west stands, was in the tower where we built the pile, one by one, and also they were drilling them so they could put the uranium in into the holes, and that was all determined by people like Fermi and that, where they used their calculators and such.
So when you actually, I don't know if you were involved in this piece, but when they assembled the blocks, put them in place, was it very dusty? Did they have to keep it really clean?
Yes and no. I mean, when we used just plain wood planers, actually we only had one, I think, where we planed the blocks, and then we would square them off, and then we would slide them down. The tower was, the floor of the tower was way below the grade. So there were stairs that went down to the bottom of the tower, and we put a a 2 by 12 on one side of the stairs, and we could slide the carbon blocks down, which eventually it got very slippery and they'd really whiz down there, and we would have like a mattress down at the bottom where they would land, and then we could pile them up. And I understand there were 45,000 blocks in the pile. Wow. I didn't believe that we work with that many, but it was actually it was a day and a night operation. They did a lot of the work, the compressing of the uranium and everything, at nighttime. And a lot of people, I guess, around there wondering why all the lights were on in the west stands and that people working there all night long. You know, because we would enter at the north end of the west stands, and that's where trucks could go in and out and deliver equipment, and a lot of, 50-gallon drums with, I don't know what was in them, because they just stored them there, and it was just like a hush-hush thing, in and out, and of course eventually the west stands were tore down, and they put a skating rink there. Below the east and the north stands, the north stands were still up there, and they had a nice skating rink down there. And Commons was way over on the northeast corner of the Stag Field. Fermi was down by the pile with a slide rule, and the rod that they used to go in the pile. And he's the one that controlled the rod. He stood there and he pushed it in and out to his calculations, and he would figure out a slide rule. Then he would push the rod in a little bit or pull it out until he got his calculations correct. And he said that was it. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah, I was wondering whether you went on to the second reactor.
No, that was that one big reactor. That was a humongous thing, 20 or 30 feet high and wide and everything. But then there are other people there that left there and went to Los Alamos. I think that's where they went after the university. They moved out to Los Alamos, and then they extended other places, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and.
Didn't they offer you a position at Argonne, out in the west suburbs?
Yeah, I was offered a position at Argonne, but
back in the day.
I thought it was so far out. I didn't realize it was just right outside of Chicago. So I declined it, and I took a job with some other company and went to work for them, and I stayed with them for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
A company called Jocelyn Manufacturing. It was down in Bridgeport, and I took an electrician's job, maintenance electrician's job there. And after they left, and they went to, actually they moved out to the suburbs of Chicago, and I just didn't want to go there. I went and got another job and worked with them, with the Pullman Company. I was as an electrician too, and I worked with them building airplane wings.
And then after that you went back to night school and got your teaching certificate and taught shop.
I started teaching without a certificate, but they needed somebody to teach shop. And being an electrician and that, they needed the teachers, and I got the teacher job to teach at Tilden Tech High School, and I got a job teaching there, and I taught there for 20 years. And left there, I retired as a teacher. So that's the story of my life.
That's wonderful. So looking back, were you proud to have been part of the Chicago Pile operations?
Well, it was so secret at that time. It was just a job, you know. And then eventually they started having forums, and the 20th year, I think we went to Washington, D.C. to commemorate the first atomic pile, critical, when it went critical. And there I got to meet a lot of dignitaries and things like that, and received a...
So who was president? Who was president in 1962?
Was it Kennedy, wasn't it? I got to meet him at the, we went to the White House, and fortunately we drove up to the gate of the White House, and they said the CP1 guys, and they opened the doors and we went right in. Usually you've got guards going in and everything, and we met President Kennedy, I have pictures of him, in the Rose Garden of the White House. And he came out and we presented him a small plastic statue of the first pile. And he said that was great. He's going to see that it gets into the Smithsonian and not going to stay with the White House or anything like that.
So by that time, Fermi was already died. Do you remember who was, Arthur Compton, was he there? Or
Arthur, no.
Walter Zinn?
Well, yes. And yes, Compton's wife was there. Fermi had passed away, and so had Arthur Compton. And their wives were at this dinner with the other notaries. And that's where I got that medal. I'm pretty sure that was in 1942 or wow. That's 75 years ago, though it is, and it's on the table there. It's got my name on it.
It's almost like a Nobel Prize.
Oh, I think only 50 of them were handed out. I'm not sure, and I made the little thing to hold it, the little plastic thing. Oh, thanks. This is it here. And that's got, it says, 1942 to 62. That's the 20th anniversary they gave it to us. So I put it in plastic so I have something to save for posterity. At least I can put that up there too. And that's my memories. I left there and went to work for a company called Jocelyn Manufacturing, which is no longer in Chicago area, and stayed there 20 years. And
so
then went
pretty soon after, like in 1943, you started with Jocelyn?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I stayed there. As a matter of fact, I started as an apprentice electrician and I worked my way up to journeyman. And then had the opportunity to take a job teaching high school. And that's when I went and taught high school for about 20 years, 25 years with Jocelyn, and then 20 years teaching.
Right after the Manhattan Project, though, you actually had two small jobs. One was we worked for the, you did on the freighters around Lake Michigan.
Oh, yeah, that was just a small job. Yeah, between, I got tired of working at the university, so I took a job as a deckhand on the ore freighters at Clyde Lake Michigan. And I went all over to up to Minnesota, down to Erie, Michigan, and the Lake Erie, down through the Great Lakes on the boats. And then I finally got tired of that.
Then you did a short stint.
He
supporting the war,
He remembers more than I do now.
Yeah, I've heard it a lot. So, and I don't get tired of hearing it. So, but you also worked in the Pullman plant.
Oh, the Pullman plant, yeah. My dad was a guard there, and he said, why don't you go and work there? And we were making C-47 airplane wings at the Pullman plant. That was at 103rd and Cottage Grove. It's, I think it was part of a high school after the plant closed. You know, I worked there for a time, then I went over to...
then you went to Jocelyn's, and then you taught.
Jocelyn's, yeah, and then...
Nice. Sound like you had a good time.
Oh, yeah, well, I was young. I mean, you know, you went from place to place. If you didn't like it, you know, believe it or not, 73 cents an hour you were making in a factory, you know, as a electrician.
Do you remember your salary from the university?
Yeah, it wasn't much more, about $92 a month. Oh, oh yeah.
$92 a month. Wow. Were you living at home?
I was living at home with my folks then, yeah.
That helps.
That helped, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, I just handed out to them like rent, you know.
When did you get married?
1951, March 31st. It was our father's birthday. We got married on, that was a Saturday. Yep.
So we'll be married
Wow.
67.
I think the church is still there at 65th in Peoria. Maybe not, I don't know. The church is anyhow. And from there on,
Children.
4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, all doing fairly well.
Grandchildren?
9.
Great.
9 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. Everything is just living, good neighbors, active in church and the community. So we've had a pretty good life.
No, my favorite story, he touched on it though, is how they would put them on the streetcar with the uranium samples.
Yeah.
And until, you know, that's how, really brings how primitive it was. They had to make their own, he wasn't involved with it, I think, but they made their own test equipment. It just didn't exist. And so it just to let you know how leading edge that really was at the time.
Well, primitive. It was. I mean, you go downtown. I can't even remember where I picked up the uranium at. But anyhow, I had to go down to Cottage Grove streetcar and take that down back to the university in my pocket.
So how big were the samples?
It was just like a beer can of uranium.
Okay. And how heavy was that?
Not very. I could put it in my pocket and just carry it in my pocket. That's how I did it. Went down there, picked it up, brought it back, and they did eventually. After that, they did take a blood count, and they found out the red corpuscles don't work too well with uranium. So they started going down there with a station wagon and a lead container.
And all they did was give you a few days off. Like
That's all, a week, I think. So I took a week off and went back, and they took a blood test. Okay, you're back on. Very lucky that here I am going on 94. You know, there's nobody else left. Like I say, I'm the lone man standing. Because the last one that I know of was Jerry Pilecki. I don't know if you heard of him. He was a young scientist, and he's living here in Orland Park too. He died at 91. So, and I don't know of anybody else that's around at all. So, And it's funny, I got that picture. You saw that picture. That it's the lone man standing. Joe took that picture. I think Joe took that picture, didn't you?
I was there. That was
You was there, yeah.
University of Chicago.
That's right. And they had a bunch of kids there. That were there by the statue, at their big black thing there, and these kids were looking at it. And the guide that was taking us around, she told these kids that who I was and that, and they were, oh my gosh, Yeah, there were about 10 or 15 kids that came out and stood there listening to me. What do you want to dream? Talk about the different things that happened then. And all that, if you go down to the university, you won't know the place at all. The new buildings there is no West Stands. There's nothing, no Stag Field. I even think the library is gone, isn't it? They used to be in the middle of Stag Field. They built a library. And actually, I took my daughter there to do some research. And I remember going through the library and finding some books. And in one of the books, it was our old, I think it was a Republican representative, Mel Metcalf. If you know the name, his name was in the book, and I had my daughter there and said, hey, look at this. And Mel went to Tilden Tech too. So we got to see things like that in there. And I don't know where the library is located now. Because
It's still there.
Oh, is it still there?
Regenstein.
Right in the end there. Well, that was there, and the Commons was at the corner there too. The University Commons, that was like a restaurant and that. On the northeast corner of Stagfield, it was. And then I don't know if they rebuilt so much down there. I mean, you get lost down there now, with the different buildings. I spent a lot of my time, lunch hours and that, going over to the Museum of Science and Industry. I spent a lot of time over there because it took a long time to go through it. And I do my lunch hours there and that. But, all that faded away when they moved to Argonne and that. So here I am now.